Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of August the 24th and 25th, 2024. I also want to have a quick look at Kamala Harris and RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr. I'm going to spend most of my time on Kamala Harris. Now, I did watch Kamala Harris's speech, or listen to Kamala Harris's speech at the end of the Democratic convention. You know, I'm not a great expert on these things. From what I heard of her, it sounded fine. I can see how many people might have been inspired by that speech, and she discussed her program, and of course she attacked Donald. I mean, I'm not. As I said, I'm not an expert in terms of judging the impact of that kind of speech, but you know, it was well prepared, it was well delivered, seemed okay by me as far as I'm concerned. But you know, that speech is important for a number of reasons, because during that speech she accepted the Democrat nomination. And of course, the reason I was listening to it is because I was looking at the clock, and I wanted to look at the time in which she actually said that she accepted the Democrat nomination, because you know, that is an important moment. It's not the only moment, and I did want to consider it. Was that a good time to be accepting the Democrat nomination? You could say, in some respects, that time is, you know, the beginning of her formal candidature for the U.S. presidency. And you could also look at the chart that when the convention got adjourned, you know, someone announced that, oh, the convention is adjourned, right towards the end. I mean, that's obviously not so important as Kamala accepting the nomination, but I thought I noted that time, and again, there's something interesting about that time as well, which I do want to discuss. And of course, the next big news, or supposedly the next big news, you may know by the time you actually watch this video, is whether RFK is going to pull out as the third candidate, and also whether or not he's going to endorse Trump. As I understand it, the Kennedy campaign they're really annoyed with the Democrats, aren't they? Because the Democrats have done everything they can to get them off the ballot paper in different states, legal devices and so on and so on. So I don't know. I think that was a bad thing for the Democrats to do somehow, because I think it might still come back on them. You know, if you look at previous elections, third party candidates have made a big difference. You know, obviously Ross Perot in 1992. He definitely cost George Bush Sr. the election, or Ralph Nader in 2000 cost Al Gore the election, certainly in Florida. Just a few votes went to Ralph Nader, this environmental campaigner, crusader, and that was all it took. So even if hardly anyone is going to vote for RFK, it could make could make a big difference. You know, a few thousand votes in Pennsylvania. It's just all it takes, isn't it? So I will be looking at RFK. I won't spend a lot of time on RFK, but I primarily want to consider how his chart links with Kamala's chart. Is there anything about his chart that is bad for Kamala? But one other thing I want to look at again is the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. This Jupiter-Saturn cycle, we really can't underestimate this Jupiter-Saturn cycle in terms of how the election is going to run. You know, there is a way of looking at this Jupiter-Saturn cycle and to say this really is in favour of a Kamala victory, but there are some caveats on that. I mean, I've discussed it before, but I've looked at the details of sort of every election since George Washington, and you do start to see this pattern coming, but that is something I want to discuss. But first of all, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. Now, just a reminder, if you're not subscribed and you enjoy this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to subscribe. Like, it makes a big difference to my channel, and I'm what am I on, 6,300 or something, and God, 10,000 still seems a long way. I need to get to that 10,000 subscribers. I know 10,000 subscribers doesn't mean anything, but it's a milestone that I'm kind of trying to focus on. And also, if you like this video, I would be really grateful if you were to like this video. And if you dislike it, I suppose you have to indicate your dislike. Your dislike is kind of interesting in itself. My previous video, the video I did for Friday, there were a few people who disliked it. I don't quite know what I said that was so controversial, but I always find that interesting to look at the dislikes as well. Okay, so anyway, let me look at what's going on this weekend. And here is a chart for the weekend. There's Kamala and RFK. They don't need any introduction. So looking at the chart for the weekend, I'm not saying it's particularly exciting. The weekend, this is a chart actually of the middle of the weekend when, actually that's a chart for Friday. That's a chart for the weekend. Here's a chart for the weekend. So you can see that in the middle of a weekend, as Saturday turns into Sunday, the moon is at 16 Taurus. So it's very much a moon in Taurus weekend. The moon actually goes into Taurus at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday if you're in London. So in the Americas, certainly moon in Taurus all weekend. If you're in Europe, Africa, unless you get up really early, the moon is in Taurus. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, you may have to wait until, or East Asia, you may have to wait until the morning, late morning, for the moon to go into Taurus. But I think we can just pretty much say it's all about the moon being in Taurus. So the moon in Taurus, it's an earth sign. There's quite a lot of planets in earth signs this weekend. We've got the moon in Taurus. Remember, we've got the sun in Virgo now, an earth sign. Venus is in Virgo. So we've got 3 personal planets in earth signs. So I suppose you could say that people are going to be pretty down to earth this weekend. And people will perhaps be focusing on the things they can touch, the things that are absolutely right in front of them. And perhaps the emphasis is going to be less on the emotional side of things, trying to guess about what people are feeling. That's perhaps not a game we're going to want to play. We're going to want to be able to touch it, to see it with our own eyes. And the moon, as it goes through Taurus, it makes a number of aspects. On Saturday, it makes a square to Pluto and a trine to Sun. Trine to Sun, moon trine Sun, is, as I always say, is a very nice aspect. Moon in Taurus, Sun in Virgo. The lights are in harmony with each other. It's life-giving. It allows us to be, to an extent, at one with our environment and to feel a certain level of comfort. And then we have the moon moving on to making sextile to Saturn, square to Uranus, trine to Venus, and then a conjunction to Uranus. So the moon does make a lot of aspects, and that's really what the weekend is about, these lunar aspects. And I think as a result, at least in terms of the astrology, I don't see it as being especially busy. Lunar aspects aside, Mercury is sextile Mars. So Mercury makes a 60-degree aspect to Mars. There you can see Mercury in Leo, 22 Leo, aspecting Mars at 23 Gemini. So that sextile does provide a slightly different view of the weekend from all those lunar aspects. Mercury sextile Mars can be quite verbal, and if something annoys us, we're going to want to talk about it. But I don't think I don't think it's going to be particularly emotional. I don't think we're going to see really super angry, intense words with that. It's more on the surface, I think, I mean, Mercury's in Leo, so I suppose Mercury in Leo retrograde, certain people may have sensitive egos and a little bit, and if you upset them, they might want to give you a piece of their mind, or you might want to give them a piece of their mind. But it is a sextile. Mercury, it's not like a Mercury square Mars. Mercury sextile Mars is a more gentle and constructive energy, and so with Mercury sextile Mars, we may be able to express ourselves in a way that is calm, and we don't jump to conclusions, and people take note of what we're saying, and it may actually be a good time to be able to dynamically demonstrate how clever we are with that Mercury sextile Mars. And that's it really for the geocentric picture. There's not a great deal to report. I mean, I'm not saying nothing's going to happen this weekend, but astrologically it's fairly quiet. Turning to the heliocentric picture, so this is what's happening heliocentrically, and heliocentrically there is a suggestion of a certain amount of fear in the air, fear and uncertainty. The reason I'm saying that is because of Mercury. So Mercury on Friday or Thursday, Friday, Mercury made a conjunction to Saturn. And I was speculating that Mercury conjunct Saturn, might create a certain amount of pessimism on Friday. I don't know whether you're feeling pessimistic. I don't know. You're probably feeling fine. But just generally overall in the world around us, there's a sort of a sense that, things are a little bit difficult and we can't expect the future to be bright. Things can go wrong. And now we've got Mercury. Remember, Mercury heliocentrically is a fast mover. It does move very quickly. Can move, 5 degrees a day. I'm not quite sure what the movement is at the moment with Mercury. So Mercury is just off the conjunction of Saturn, so it's 6 degrees off the conjunction of Saturn. It's now moving to a conjunction of Neptune. So what you've got Mercury on the conjunct the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, and Saturn-Neptune as a pair is often about fear. Saturn is about restriction. It's about we're trying to keep everything together, and then Neptune is about just the dissolution of the seas. It's about everything merging into each other, and Saturn doesn't want that. Saturn does want to keep it together, yet Neptune is trying to kind of erode Saturn's boundaries. And then you've got Mercury in the middle, and so Mercury is feeling concerned. We are feeling there's a lot to be worried about. Maybe we can't touch it. In fact, probably we can't touch what we're afraid of, but we just know that something isn't right. So there may be a certain sense of uneasiness. But it is a heliocentric chart, so I don't think we need to necessarily take it too personally. It's more about the collective. And I do think that Mercury on a Saturn-Neptune midpoint is something that we need to take into account, because what we've basically got is we've got Mercury conjunct Saturn merging into Mercury conjunct Neptune. So, we move from trying to structure things to basically being overwhelmed by it all. I say we, as again, it may be more about the collective. So that's the main thing going on with the heliocentric chart. That's probably about it. I suppose you could say that there's Venus in Libra, sort of making a quincunx to Neptune and a quincunx to Uranus. So applying to a quincunx of Neptune, separating from a quincunx of Uranus. So we can say that Venus is on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. So that could be about money, it could be about relationships, it may just be that certain relationships have a somewhat nebulous quality. there are certain relationships that are quite difficult to define. We don't know whether someone is a friend. We don't know whether someone is perhaps even closer, a partner, or, and I won't say a spouse, but we're not quite sure what the relationship, what the nature of many of the relationships we're in actually is. And same may be the case for money, where maybe a certain sense of we don't really know. And that means if we don't really know, we probably shouldn't make decisions. We shouldn't do anything dramatic, because perhaps we're in a position of confusion. And it's passing. Venus doesn't move as fast as Mercury heliocentrically, but it's still a fast mover. Okay, so I now want to look at the 12 signs and what's going on with the 12 signs over the weekend. And maybe I can be briefer than usual. Maybe, I think that's probably a forlorn hope, but there aren't sort of huge aspects to report, so maybe I can be a little briefer than usual in my descriptions for the 12 signs, but we'll have to see. Okay, these are my forecasts for the weekend for the 12 signs, and that is the weekend of August the 24th and 25th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you do have a lot to say for yourself. You might perhaps not have as much energy as you had, say, Thursday and Friday, but you still have the capacity to talk, a considerable capacity to talk, and that is because Mercury is sextile Mars. And so, Mars is your ruler. Mercury is a planet of communication. Mercury is making the sextile to Mars. So Aries, you can express yourself with considerable energy. And if there's something you don't like, I think that we're all going to hear about it. But it's not just about confrontation. It is a sextile, and sextiles tend to be about skill and being able to make something look good and working on it. Because there's always a bit of effort in a sextile. Remember, sextile is 2 times 3, six of a circle. 2 is about conflict. 3 is about ease. So you do have to put a little bit of effort to make an impression, but you know how to do it. You know how to make an effort to get noticed, and you'll be able to put your words together very well, with great power and conviction. So if you feel that there's something that needs to be said this weekend, then I think it's very important that you don't hold back. On a different note, Aries, I think that you are going to be aware of your own resources. When you look at what you're planning on doing in the future, you can see what you have and what you don't have, and whether you've got enough to see you through. I mean, I suppose life is always a bit of an expedition. You've got to be prepared for the expedition. I suppose one also thinks of, I'm not very good on the Bible. The parable of the virgins going to the wedding feast and having enough oil and for their lamps. How does it go? You had these young women going to a wedding, and it was a trip, and they needed to have oil, and some of these women did have enough oil, and others didn't. And I suppose Christ was using it as a parable to say that we've got to have enough oil for our lamps if we're going on some kind of trip. And I suppose that parable may may apply to you. I mean, I know I shouldn't perhaps be mixing up the Bible with astrology, but I'm not being disrespectful here. That's not my aim. So you've got to be prepared, like the young women going to the wedding, and so do focus on your resources, and that shouldn't be so difficult, really, because the moon is in Taurus, and it's it is making a trine to the sun. Okay, I know that's sort of the beginning of a weekend that trine happens, but you have to be prepared, and you need to just do an inventory. Look at what you've got. Have you got enough to get by? And whatever it is that you need supplies of, and it may be that for some Arians will look at what they've got and they might feel that now is a time when perhaps they should be bringing in supplies. Not because there's going to be a famine or some Armageddon situation, but I suppose certainly if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's the winter, and no, it's not the winter. I know it's the summer, but seasons are. I don't know. Where I am, the seasons are moving so quick now. It seems to be autumn, and we're very much. It's autumn, but we're it's still in August, but it's got much colder, and so perhaps there is a sense of, at least metaphorically, preparing for the winter and just looking at, for example, how much money you've got. How much, I don't know, whatever supplies you need, canned goods, whatever you need, whatever it is, just make sure that's all there. And I think that's just something that you are going to be able to do with the sun moving into Virgo. I know that the sun moving into Virgo seems a little bit boring from an Aries perspective, but now, between now and late September, you do have a chance to build up your resources, and also to just focus really on the things that matter. And so that's probably what your weekend should be about. Making sure you've got enough, and at the same time being very clear about your thoughts and your opinions, and not being afraid to speak up, because when you speak up, when you're communicating, your many abilities will be completely obvious. Taurus. Moon is basically in Taurus for the whole weekend, and overall I would have said that is something that really is to be welcomed. With the moon in your sign, you're feeling comfortable, and you feel that you're in the right place, and at the same time, you're able to respond correctly. That can sometimes be a case for Taurans. Taurans, as I've perhaps said in the past, can be a bit blunt. They can say things which are a bit inappropriate. They're focusing on something, I don't know, like details. They focus on a detail or something material, and Taurans are very good at spoiling the magic with the wrong word. But I don't think you're going to spoil the magic today. I think that you are in tune with everything, and I think that people are going to respect you, and at the same time you're going to have a clear sense of what you can do and what you're good at, and also what you enjoy doing. And that is important, thinking about what you enjoy doing. And so if you can do something you enjoy, if it can be useful as well, so much the better. But but it's there, and I think at the same time, your enthusiasm this weekend is actually going to be quite clear. You are going to be quite optimistic. Now, there could be a certain amount of pessimism around you. It's not about you. It's just the fact that in the heliocentric chart, we've got Mercury on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And so there is a lot of fear around you. But I don't think, it's not your fear, but you can feel it. You can pick up on it. And perhaps you are an antidote for that fear, because I think you are capable of being very enthusiastic. You're enthusiastic about what you can do, about what you enjoy doing and what you're good at. And if that's the way you feel, then let everyone know how enthusiastic you are. If they don't appreciate it, then, you know, that's not your fault, is it? Now, as far as relationships are concerned, I suppose I need to point out the fact that in the heliocentric chart, Venus is on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. Now, I talked about this in my sort of introduction to the planetary picture for everyone, but I think it's specific to you, maybe to Libra as well, because Libra is also ruled by Venus. But with Venus on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, relationships could be a little bit confusing. And the issue may be, what is the nature of a relationship? What is a relationship all about? And, you know, where are the boundaries? And it may be somewhat confusing. Now, I don't think this is going to be, maybe it's not going to be quite such a problem if your native language is one that uses a formal you, perhaps, because I think it's seen that one of the great advantages of languages like, you know, Russian or Polish or I think French, these kind of languages, or Czech or Slovak or whatever, they have this formal you. So if you know someone well, you use the singular you, and you use a different pronoun, and that sort of sets the boundaries, and it can be quite useful. And if you have the if you use the formal you, you're setting the boundaries. But English doesn't have this. It used to have it, actually, in the sort of 14th century and before. It used to be a big deal. And there are sort of descriptions of, I don't know, 14th, 15th century women in England having real arguments about whether or not the formal you is being used. But in England, we've lost it now. And so having a formal and informal you allows you to set boundaries. And I think boundaries in relationships are going to be very important today. And so I think easier if you're using a language which has this formality to it. But if you don't have it, even if you do have it, certain relationships, it's going to be just confusing what the nature of the relationship actually is. It is not going to be entirely clear, and one person may feel they can actually be much more closer and intimate than the other person. So do consider the various relationships you're in, because boundaries may not be very clear, and there is scope here for people making false assumptions, perhaps making sort of inappropriate gestures, which for reply might be, no, you're not my friend, all that kind of thing. So do be very careful there, and don't be sloppy in terms of your thinking about relationships. Don't assume that you actually understand the nature of a relationship. It might seem obvious to you, but it might not be obvious at all, and it just may be that you've got something wrong. And I suppose, err on the side of formality, I would have said, in terms of how you deal with other people. And I suppose you'll also hope that other people will err on the side of formality. You need to be clear. I think that is very important. But I don't want to take away from the fact that it's going to be a good weekend. We've got Moon in Taurus, as I said right at the beginning, you are comfortable where you are. Just don't make too many assumptions in a social sense. And at the same time, the Moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. It's making a trine to Venus, and that conjunction between the Moon and Venus, trine between the Moon and Venus, is going to help relationships, I think. So relationships are not, it's not entirely difficult, the area of relationships. It needn't be a problem. And perhaps with Moon conjunct Uranus, trine Venus, maybe doing something slightly inappropriate, perhaps being a little bit forward, making an assumption in relationships. I think it's probably a bad idea, but there may be a certain situation where something happens unexpectedly which can actually strengthen a relationship. There may be a bit of confusion and uncertainty to begin with, but maybe there'll be a moment of clarity when sort of relationships can really click together. Gemini, this weekend you possibly feel that you don't really want to be part of things. Not really. I mean, you could if you want, but can you really be bothered? I think that's part of what you feel, and you may just prefer it, Gemini, if you can just do things in your own way and not really have to explain or apologize, and drift off in your own private world. I mean, that is a temptation, and I'm not saying there's actually anything wrong with that, but it might be a little bit of a waste. I mean, we do have a sextile between Mercury and Venus, and Mercury and Mars, and that Mercury sextile Mars does give you the capacity to communicate, tell the world who you are, what you've got to offer, and it will be easier than you think. But still, I understand you might feel you don't want to be bothered, but I think it is worth your while being bothered. So if you're in a situation, Gemini, where you're wondering whether or not to take a particular social initiative, for example, whether or not to go somewhere, whether or not to meet someone, and it's a borderline decision, probably you should err on the side of being sociable, because if you are sociable and if you are with other people, then I think that you will have a chance to really come into your own. You don't have to be the centre of attention at all. It's not about being a centre of attention. It's just that there may be a moment when perhaps there is a subject that comes up, there is something of general concern, and you pick up on it, and you really do have something to say, and people listen to you because you're a Gemini, you're clever, you know lots of stuff. I know I would be saying that because I'm a Gemini, at least my son's in Gemini, but you can really demonstrate who you are and what you've got to offer. But still, I do understand some of the reservations you might feel. I mean, heliocentrically, Mercury is on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint this weekend. So with Mercury on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, there could be a fear that perhaps if you get too involved with something, you might be overwhelmed, and you might just think that it's just not worth it. I'm not saying that you should discount your reservations. I think it's absolutely reasonable to be cautious. So perhaps if you do socialize, which I think is possibly the right thing to do, you just need to make sure that it's on your terms, and that you always know where the exits are. So if you're going somewhere, just make sure that you can leave quickly. So, for example, if you are going to a party or some group activity, you might want to say right at the beginning that you might have to leave early or something like that, because Geminis can switch quickly. Geminis can be very enthusiastic one moment, and then the next moment, bang, the enthusiasm has just completely gone and they just want to leave. And so make sure that the escapes are there for you. But are you really going to want to leave early? Are you really going to be too disappointed with people once you give yourself a chance? I think not. I think, Gemini, if you actually make the effort this weekend, you're going to be able to be popular. You can be maybe even the life and soul of the party. You don't have to be the life and soul of a party, but you could be. And also consider connections. Actually, Geminis are quite interested in connections. Who are you connecting with? Who might be of interest? Who might be of use to you at a later stage? And this weekend, you're actually going to be very good at making new connections, and you can increase the size of your address book if that's what you want. Once people see who you are and what you've got to offer, they're going to want to know you. They're going to want to make sure that they have access to you in the future. So that is another good reason for not keeping yourself to yourself. But I do understand that inclination. It is very much there, and I think that you can just perhaps have the best of both worlds. You can be here, there, and everywhere, but at the same time, you will have always prepared your exits, and you will have known how to leave a situation in a hurry if you feel that is necessary. Cancer, things are moving for you, Cancer. I think that the overall situation is looking good. The moon is in a good position at the moment. The moon is in Taurus, and the moon is exalted in Taurus, and Cancer, of course, has a special relationship with the moon, and so when the moon is exalted, you could say that Cancer is exalted as well. Your sign is exalted, and the moon at the beginning of the weekend is making a trine to the sun, and goes on to make a trine to Venus, and it makes a conjunction to Uranus. So I think, Cancer, you just do feel that there is action, and I don't think that you need to be afraid of other people. I think that from a social perspective, you can be very present, and I think that you'll know how to present yourself well, and also you'll be able to make the right choices. Certainly in a social sense, you can make the right choices. You'll just know which people you need to meet, and perhaps which people should be avoided. And at the same time, the way you present yourself, the way you communicate, will just be very balanced and very harmonious. It's because you just understand who you're talking to. That, I suppose, is the nature of being a Cancerian. You just get it. You understand what's needed. You understand where the limits are, and you also understand, which people can be trusted, which people are going to look after you, and perhaps which people should be avoided. And in the process of interacting with people, well, even if you don't interact with people, I think that you do get a sense of what you'd like to be doing, a sense of perhaps your hopes for the future, and it's almost that when you're with people, you get an idea about how you'd like things to be. And, you perhaps you listen to what people say. You listen, particularly this weekend, listen to people's aspirations. Listen to people's visions of the future. And you might hear people's visions of the future which just seem very limiting and very disappointing. Other people might have visions of a future which are just completely far-fetched. So, Cancer, do try to listen to what people are saying, because I think you may get some valuable insights. And if you've got time on your own, which I think you should try to have a little bit of time on your own this weekend, do consider what goes beyond your immediate targets and goals. What is beyond that? Once you've achieved whatever you're trying to achieve, I don't know, this month, next year, whatever, what happens next? And that might be something that Cancerians might want to pay some attention to. And that will help perhaps align you to the future. And as far as closer relationships are concerned, the moon is making a sextile to Saturn. So moon in Taurus making a sextile aspect to Saturn in Pisces. And that sextile between moon and Saturn, I would have said, is useful, and it allows you to create solid, no-nonsense connections with another person, and there won't be any ambiguity, and it'll be very clear what the relationship is about, why it exists, and what both parties want to achieve. And also with this moon sextile Saturn, there's a suggestion here that you can benefit perhaps from another person's experience and wisdom, whatever that relationship is, even if it's something quite short term. You do understand the importance of grounding at the moment and making sure that the future is properly prepared for. And with that moon sextile Saturn, you can be given further grounding by what another person says to you. Perhaps their advice, you want to know something, you're not sure about something, you ask someone, and they will be able to, I think in many cases, give you the answers that you are looking for. So overall, Cancer, I don't think there's anything really to worry about this weekend. It looks okay. Okay, the moon does make a conjunction to Uranus, that is true. And that moon conjunct Uranus, okay, there may be moments of surprise. Perhaps surprise relating to another person. You hear what they have to say, and that really is it's not what you're expecting. Or perhaps they do something, but surprises can be a two-way thing. You are actually yourself able to create surprises. So if I say that you can be surprised by someone else's behavior, well, that requires someone else to take action. Someone else has to do something to surprise you. And we shouldn't forget that this is pretty much a daily forecast that I'm doing with astrology. This is a weekend, but I do forecast every single day. So, what I'm trying to do with these horoscopes is looking at the potential of the day, but in a way, it is only potential. And so someone may or may not surprise you. But what about you delivering the surprises? You can actually surprise people. That is a choice you have. Now, I'm not saying that you should surprise people just for the sake of it, but on Sunday, there may be a moment where you feel that you do need to surprise someone, because surprise, it does give you an advantage. If someone is not prepared, the surprise of the dog deciding to bark, someone's not prepared, it messes you up, it messes your flow up. You wonder what to say next because the dog is disturbing you. But yeah, someone may very briefly be lost for words, or they don't actually know how to respond to you, and that could actually work to your advantage. Could perhaps also work to everyone's advantage. Leo, I would hope this weekend that you would try to accomplish something. You know, I know certainly in the Northern Hemisphere it's sort of late August and people are starting to slow down. That's true. But that doesn't mean necessarily that you have to slow down. There are things of practical significance that I think you should be doing. And of course, it would be particularly helpful, Leo, if you were working over the weekend or doing something of a business nature. But I understand that, you know, some Leos, you know, they might be retired, they might not be working over the weekend, but still, you can think perhaps about your status, how you come across in society, how you are able to push forward your agenda, whatever that agenda might be. And if it's just a weekend and you're not doing anything over the weekend, but you have to go to work on Monday, well, perhaps you can do some preparations over the weekend. Because this weekend, you know, with the moon in Taurus, you are very, very focused on being successful and making an impression. And you have a good understanding, I think, of material and financial details and what needs to be done and what is expected of you. And I don't think that there are going to be many details that pass you by. And also, you're going to be, I think, quite an effective communicator. I think you'll be quite good at selling things this weekend because, you know, Mercury is making a sextile to Jupiter. Mercury's making a sextile to Mars. So Mercury sextile Mars is you presenting yourself powerfully because Mercury is in Leo. I know it's retrograde, but it is in your sign. It is given a boost by the sextile to Mars. So I think you can present yourself and your ideas very well. Okay, these ideas might be just general, your thoughts about, you know, whatever, life, the universe and everything, but they may be more focused. They may be focused about something that you are actively engaged in. It may not be work-related. It may be to do with your interests, your hobbies, your community. You have got something to offer here, and it would be a shame if you were to just sort of waste the weekend and just say, well, it's a weekend. Lazy Leo's going to do nothing. I'm not saying Leos are lazy. One of the first astrology books talked about lazy Leos. I know that's not true, but it's probably because lazy and Leo both begin with L and it kind of slips off the tongue. But just on the off chance, don't be a lazy Leo this weekend, because really there is a lot you can do and a lot you can accomplish in many different areas of your life. So that's probably as far as it goes. And just a reminder that the moon and the sun are in trine. That's always good. That sun-moon trine being in a 120-degree aspect. Okay, that aspect is exact at the beginning of a weekend, but still you've got moon in Taurus, sun in Virgo, and that just gives you a sense of balance, and it also gives you a sense of, you know, just what needs to be done. What needs to be done, perhaps, to safeguard the future. And there is a feeling that overall, Leo, you are going in the right direction. Virgo. I'm fairly confident, Virgo, that it's going to be a good weekend. Now, I should make it clear that I do like Virgos. I don't have a problem with Virgos. Someone suggested in the comments that I didn't like Virgos. Maybe that is because in my Friday, was it? I did a few days ago. I did a video on Virgos, and I did get a few dislikes on that one. And I think someone suggested I did have a problem with Virgos. Well, the reason I had a problem with Virgos is because I don't have a problem with Virgos, but I was talking about Virgos in power, I suppose, like Caligula, and who had power, Ivan the Terrible, and I might have given the impression that I had an issue with Virgos. Of course, that's not true. I was just looking at Virgo from a perspective of power, and of course the kind of people I'm interested in. And I sort of forgot to mention some Virgo writers like Tolstoy, or someone suggested, Sophia Loren is a Virgo. I should have mentioned that. I don't know a great deal about Sophia Loren, but anyway, I don't want to ramble. The point is that I really want to demonstrate that I don't have a problem with Virgos by saying that Virgo is really going to have a good weekend. All things being equal, of course. It's always all things being equal. But from a strict astrological perspective, if we look at the astrological symbolism, it is looking good. I mean, for example, this weekend we have a sextile between Mercury and Mars, and Mercury is your ruler, and that sextile to Mars gives you the ability to, I think, express yourself extremely well, and in a sort of quite unexpected way. Sort of Mercury, it's in Leo, it is retrograde, and it just might seem as if it can't express itself, but then it can. It just almost comes out of nowhere. And I suppose this is a reminder that Virgo is watching all the time. Virgo is analyzing all the time. Virgo is making connections all the time. And with this Mercury sextile Mars, when the moment arrives, you can almost report your findings, because you are kind of making findings. You're sort of analyzing things, making conclusions, and once you realize that something is the case, Virgo, then it's all obvious. You've done your research, and you do make it clear, and it all comes together. I think Peter Falk was a Virgo, wasn't he? The guy who played Columbo. I think he was a Virgo. So I know Peter Falk is not the same as Columbo, but maybe that's how it all works. You've done your research, and you make the connections, and you seem a little bit chaotic, perhaps. People underestimate you, and then suddenly it becomes clear. You come up with the result. What is it? Just one more thing. You solve the case. So it may be that you have an extra advantage here, Virgo, in that you can be underestimated. So if people underestimate you this weekend, well, more power to you, isn't it? So that's one thing going on. And at the same time, we've got the moon in Taurus, and the moon is in Taurus, which is an earth sign. Virgo is an earth sign. The moon is making a trine aspect to the sun in Virgo. It's making a trine aspect to Venus in Virgo. And so really things are moving very well. And as I've already suggested, I think that your brain is actually moving very well. And you're able to go over old ground and perhaps pick up things that people had forgotten in the past and start to actually be able to use them and bring them into light. And so there's really just no need to be concerned. And I think with this moon trine the sun, it just gives you a sense of, I suppose, harmony. Moon is in an earth sign in Taurus, sun in Virgo, earth sign. When the sun and the moon are in trine aspect, or even just in signs that have a trine relationship, there is a sense of harmony, of just being one with the world. And with that moon in Taurus, you should never make the assumption that you understand the whole picture. I think actually you do understand the whole picture, particularly if you're focused on trying to crack particular problems. But there's always new information to discover. And if you feel that something is being hidden, and that if you were to discover this piece of information, it would in some way expand your horizons, give you new opportunities, then go out and find it, because I think that it's definitely there for you. And moon conjunct Uranus, it's easy to focus on the material, but it's also about the earth, and it's about, I suppose, Mother Earth. And with moon conjunct Uranus, in quite a spiritual sector of your chart, there may be an awareness about you and the planet and the divine and how things are connected together, because as a Virgo you are very grounded. And then it may just be moments this weekend where you just have an understanding of where you are in the whole scheme of things. And the scheme of things is not just about people, it's about nature, and it's about the complexity of nature, and of course the fragility of nature as well, but where you actually are in the ecosystem. And perhaps once you understand where you are in the ecosystem, that is going to give you a great sense of belonging. But also, I suppose, heliocentrically, Mercury is conjunct the Saturn Neptune midpoint. That perhaps goes back to the fragility of it all. That Mercury conjunct Saturn Neptune on the midpoint, it's not about you personally, but I do think that you pick up on a sense that everything around us is fragile, and it could be lost very easily. And that might give you all the more incentive to become one with the system, with the ecosystem, and perhaps in your own small way to be able to strengthen it. Libra. So Libra, I think that clarity is going to be important this weekend. You don't really want to have fuzzy boundaries, because fuzzy boundaries can get you into trouble, and can sort of get you into places that perhaps you don't want to go to. So these fuzzy boundaries maybe particularly apply to relationships. And this is something I was saying to Taurus as well, that with relationships you need to be clear what the nature of every relationship is that you're involved in over the weekend, because it may not be clear. It may not be clear to you. It may not be clear to other people. And so do think about all of the people you're going to be interacting with this weekend, and ask yourself, what kind of relationship is it? And perhaps try to define it. I know that's not very nice, perhaps, trying to define a relationship. It's often seems to be good to have a little bit of ambiguity, but I don't think ambiguity is a good thing. And when you're with anyone, particularly if the relationship is complicated or is ill-defined, it's just very important that you are 100% aware, totally aware of what is happening. And certainly not a time for getting drunk in other people's company. That is a bad idea. And there is just scope here for you to be maybe taken for granted, or in some way manipulated, and that's something that shouldn't be happening, and I don't think it need happen. And of course, what I'm doing when I do these astrological readings, of course, I look at things in a sense from the worst possible perspective. I just consider all the bad things that could happen, and chances are they won't happen. They almost certainly won't happen, but I suppose I have to just give the warning, just in case. But in terms of, other things happening, you do have, Libra, a very clear sense of what you want this weekend. And in fact, you have an optimistic streak. It is coming out into the open, an optimistic streak. You can see a possibility forming, and you haven't got all the details, but it certainly could happen, and it can happen if everything goes right. But it's just the beginning of something, really. It's just about your understanding of the world and what is possible in the world, and you're starting to see that something actually really is possible that you can take advantage of very soon. And I think that you perhaps benefit from the fact that the moon is in Taurus, trine Venus in moon in Taurus is trine Venus in Virgo. So, with the moon in Taurus, Libra, I think that you are, more serious than usual. There are things you do take seriously, and to an extent, you should be on your guard. And if you're a sensible Libran, I think you are on your guard. And if you're honest with yourself, you are aware that things are perhaps more complicated than they seem on the surface. Yet, with that moon trine Venus, there's an opportunity here to take advantage of your insights this weekend, because you do have powerful insights. Insights about what is making this world work, also what's happening at the emotional level or even the unconscious level. You have insights about this. And if you're really honest with yourself and you are stone cold sober, you can start to understand how people are acting. Now, it's quite possible that you misunderstand people's motivations and actions if you're sloppy or if you're not thinking clearly. But if you make a special effort to think clearly and to be stone cold sober, then the situation reverses. You will start to really understand people's motivations and really start to understand whether or not they can be trusted. And to do that, perhaps you can't be too closely involved with someone. You always have to have some distance, because with distance comes objectivity. And once you've got that objectivity and that distance and you're completely sober, then things are going to become very clear, and you'll also start to see where your self-interest lies. And there's nothing to worry about in terms of looking after your own self-interest. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing that you have to apologize for. And so really, Libra, that's a weekend. I'm not saying that there is a huge amount to report there. I think main themes are be careful with other people. Other people could be treacherous, particularly if you're not very clear about boundaries. But at the same time, if you make a special effort to be distant, sober, slightly distant, sober, and to be analytical, you can turn the tables on what was an opportunity to be totally confused can be an opportunity to be totally enlightened about someone else's motives. And on a really positive level, as I said at the beginning of this piece, you do actually have an increasingly clear vision about what is possible. And for that reason, you can be very optimistic. Whatever you think, whatever you decide about what is possible, it really can become a possibility. Of course, it's only a beginning, and it will require some work, but you need a beginning. You need that beginning, and you need that hope, and you need that optimism, and that optimism really can drive you forward. So don't allow this growing sense of a project forming to slip away. You need to keep touch with it, and you need to build it, perhaps over the next few weeks, and certainly over the weekend. Perhaps you can start to get working on it. Scorpio, you perhaps feel that other people can't be ignored. I mean, it always happens like this, doesn't it, when the moon is in Taurus? So, moon is in Taurus. Taurus is your opposite sign, and so with moon in Taurus, there are people who require your attention, and there's no harm in giving them attention. You're not losing anything. It can be a two-way benefit here, and by understanding what other people are saying and doing, understanding their motivations and understanding why they are doing what they are doing, you're actually putting yourself in a better position. You are living in a social world. We're all living in a social world, and if you understand what people are trying to achieve, then you're in a better position to make sense of this social world, and that should improve your overall position. And if you have the chance to go to parties this weekend, social gatherings, I think in most cases you should take that chance. I'm not saying that you're going to necessarily have a wonderful time, but I think that you will be connecting with people perhaps who you should be connecting with, and also you will have a better understanding of the society and world in which you live. And with the moon making a trine to Venus, there is a hint here that there's at least one person who you can benefit from, who you can certainly connect with, a person who seems to be quite sensible and down to earth, who understands your interests, and I don't think there is any conflict of interest here. But perhaps the main aspect, or at least the most important aspect this weekend, is a sextile between Mercury and Mars. And this sextile between Mercury and Mars is important because Mars is your ruler, and so when Mercury is sextiling your Mars, that has an impact on you. And Mercury at the moment is in Leo. There's now only one planet left in Leo, but it's still there. And in the Scorpio chart, Leo can have relevance to your aims and your ambitions. And so with Mercury sextile Mars, you're able to articulate your aims and your ambitions very well. You'll be able to tell people what you want, what you're looking for, and of course what you don't want as well. And I think that you'll get a sympathetic response, and you also may find that if you're doing anything connected with career or business over the weekend, you can make good progress. And your progress might not be immediately obvious to everyone. You can perhaps do something that is quite secretive and requires on your part some sort of deep feelings and deep thought, but it's all starting to come together. And this Mercury sextile Mars may actually be about a sense of new awareness. And it's possible you might want to keep this awareness to yourself, but Mercury sextile Mars is a very communicative aspect. Mercury is the communication planet. And I think by talking to people, you will have a sense of seriousness, authority, and even urgency, which I think in many cases will be very impressive. And it's not over the top. It's quite subtle the way you communicate, but that may be enough. Your seriousness will certainly make an impact, and also your sense of purpose. You will be able to display a strong sense of purpose, even if privately you have a few doubts. We all have doubts. There's nothing wrong with having doubts. Even Scorpios have a few doubts, but don't let doubt get in the way of your sense of purpose, especially when you're communicating. Sure, you have your doubts, but keep those doubts to yourself. Doubts can be worked out later, and by demonstrating to everyone that you do have a strong sense of purpose, you're going to get a powerful and, I think, favourable response. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you are having some thoughts and perhaps feelings that may feel a little bit negative. There is a certain negativity to you at the moment, or at least this weekend. I don't want to exaggerate it at all. It's just that at the moment, Sagittarius, you can possibly see things in the worst possible light, and you can see how things could go wrong. And I don't think also, Sagittarius, that you're entirely trusting. You perhaps have an insight into other people's thoughts, their private thoughts, the things that they often like to keep secret. They may not tell you about their thoughts, but you can still guess and you can make assumptions about their thoughts. And I think, Sagittarius, you will realize that nothing is quite as it seems on the surface, and that it might actually be a bad day for trusting people. Now, just because you don't trust people doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. Doesn't mean they're really up to no good. But for some reason, you do have a suspicious mind. And at the same time, Sagittarius, you perhaps have to be careful what you say. Sagittarians do perhaps have a certain reputation for using speech that is quite flowery. You say what you mean, but the things you say could actually be quite crude and surprisingly crude. It might even be crude in a way that surprises you, but the words just come out. And so do be careful what you say, because if you're too crude and too blatant, then that people might back off. And be particularly careful about using swear words. I mean, I'm sure you don't swear, but maybe you're the occasional Sagittarius who does. So just be careful what you say, and also perhaps what you discuss. Maybe there are things you would really like to discuss this weekend that other people don't want to hear about. And if you do start discussing them, you might get a negative reaction. So, I mean, it's a shame that you kind of have to think about self-censorship, but this weekend, that might be quite a good thing. Now, I'm sorry to start on a negative, but I mean, why not? I've got to start somewhere. Sort of on a positive note, Sagittarius, I think that you are actually, in spite of appearances, quite well organized, and you do have a great sense this weekend of what needs to be done, and you kind of want to have it all done by maybe Sunday, and you can see that you have the opportunity, and so Sagittarius, I suppose you better get going on it, and it may not just be anything, it may not be boring routine work. It may also be about involving other people in what you're doing. I think that's something you're going to you're going to be able to do very well. You'll be able to give people an impression that there is a hurry, that people need to be focused, that they need to have a sense of purpose, and that's something you're going to be able to push. And I suppose it's now that you're starting to benefit from the sun being in Virgo. So the sun moved into Virgo a few days ago, and in one sense, it might have been a little bit disappointing for the sun to move into Virgo, because, the sun, when it was in Leo, that was a fire sign, and you're a fire sign, and it might have been exciting. And so sun moving into Virgo may sound a bit boring, but from a Sagittarian view, Virgo is a high-profile sign. It is about career, business, being prominent, getting yourself noticed, ego development. That's what the sign Virgo is about. So the sun is in Virgo. The moon is making a trine to Virgo. And so there are things that you can do to actively advance your own agenda this weekend. And I'm not just talking about career and business. Whatever your agenda is this weekend, your organizational abilities plus your sense of purpose are really going to be able to move things along. And I think as an organizer, whatever you're trying to organize, maybe you're trying to organize people. I know, maybe you're a community organizer. Wasn't Obama a community organizer? But he wasn't a Sagittarius, was he? But still, he was a Leo. So if you want to organize people, organize your community, that's certainly Sagittarius, something you very much can do. But you just have to be a little careful about what you say. As I said right at the beginning, it's just the wrong words could just cause quite a lot of damage and might disrupt relationships in a way that is quite unnecessary. And as far as suspicions are concerned, I suppose that's how it works, isn't it? You're organizing people, or you're organizing yourself, and you're aware that perhaps there are some bad apples, but you can't just get rid of every apple in the basket just because you suspect one of the apples might be bad. You've just got to live with the uncertainty, perhaps, of knowing that there are perhaps some bad actors out there, and you should perhaps allow your intuition to guide you through and to make sure that you're not tripped up by it. So yeah, it can be useful to be a little bit suspicious, but you don't want to allow your suspicions to take over. Capricorn. There is a trine this weekend between the moon and the sun. Okay, it is at the beginning of the weekend, but still, we've got moon in Taurus, sun in Virgo this weekend, and as you're a Capricorn, that's really going to be, I think, very useful. It's going to it's going to allow your energy to flow. And things certainly are flowing. I think there's no doubt about it this weekend. And so that means that perhaps things are going to be easier than expected. So when you look at this weekend, you may have doubts about the way things are going to proceed, and you might feel that things are just not going to work out quite in the way you expected. But I think things will work out. Okay, you have to do a little bit of preparation, but I don't think you have to do too much preparation. And I think, overall, things should go to plan. And at the same time, and what really matters is that your interests and your needs are going to be looked after. That's something you are going to be able to safeguard. And I think perhaps the most important need that you have is the need to be yourself, to do things on your terms. And it's a time, Capricorn, when you are really able to tune into the things that you are good at, because there are things you are really good at. And this weekend, it should be actually quite obvious what these things you're really good at are. And actually, you can make yourself even better at them. You can sort of move things to a new level. So you don't have to be satisfied with existing at one level of expertise. You can perhaps move things up several levels of expertise, so that you can really be sure that you are doing something that is absolutely right for you, and in your own way, you're the best there is. And that expertise and excellence is all there for you. Of course, that means you have to be a little bit open-minded. If you want to take things to the next level, you may have to, at least to begin with, accept that you don't know everything. Because if you accept that you don't know everything, then you're incentivized to just get some extra knowledge, get some extra experience, whatever it takes. But it will become clear, I hope, by the end of the weekend, that you've definitely got a niche which you need to respect, and it is really important for you. And this could have implications in many different areas. Okay, it could just be about your personal satisfaction. It could be about your interests, what you enjoy in life, and just really transcending in terms of this enjoyment. But it could also have some relationship to your work, if that's relevant. May not be relevant, but something you do perhaps over the weekend could demonstrate to you that it can be used in a sort of a business or career sense. And perhaps you realize that you maybe underestimated yourself. So that is certainly a possibility. As far as relationships are concerned, I think that things look good. Moon is making a sextile to Saturn. Moon is in Taurus. The moon, remember, is ruler of Cancer, your opposite sign. So moon's in Taurus. That means that some of the important people in your life are on good form, and they're feeling comfortable, and they have a good sense of fun. I mean, that's always important, Capricorn, to have people around you who have a good sense of fun, provided, of course, that they also have a certain sense of responsibility. But with that moon sextile Saturn, that indicates that there can be good links between yourself and another person, and there are things that can be shared and things that can be communicated. And perhaps in the past this sharing and communication might not have been easy, but I think now it is coming together. So if there's someone you want to really engage with, this weekend now might be the time to do it. Of course, I suppose some Capricorns might be looking for some new relationship, in which case, well, it's always a difficulty, isn't it, with astrology? People often want to know about new relationships. That's why they are so interested in astrology. It's the way it is, I suppose. And so if you fall into that category and you are looking for a new relationship, perhaps you're just looking at this video because for the first time because you're interested in, I don't know, your love life or something like that, then do bear in mind, of course, that nothing is guaranteed. But all things being equal, that moon sextile Saturn could be useful in terms of finding someone new. And I suppose the advice I would give to Capricorns who are looking for a new relationship at the moment would be to find someone who shares your creativity, who is on the same wavelength as you creatively. If someone doesn't share your creativity, doesn't understand or appreciate your creativity, then they're probably not someone you should be bothering with. I mean, it's not just creativity. I suppose it's also a sense of fun. So that's the kind of person you should be looking for at the moment. But relationships have all sorts of levels, and it needn't be about romance. But overall, Capricorn, you should be looking for fun people who share your creative priorities. Aquarius, you are, I think, able to tell people what's on your mind. I don't think there is a problem there. What Aquarius thinks will be pretty obvious, and in the process, I suppose you're not too concerned about the impressions that you're making, and I think you may just take the view that it just has to be on your terms. You say what's on your mind. You don't really care about the response. If someone is right for you, if they're your kind of person, they're not going to be offended. If they're not your kind of person, sure, they might be offended, but so what? That would be a very Aquarian way of looking at things. And it's a weekend perhaps for seeking out people who are good conversationalists, who also share your interests. I mean, that was a feature that I was, when I was talking to Capricorn, I was saying something fairly similar, but then of course Capricorn and Aquarius, they're both ruled by Saturn, so there is a certain overlap there. But there are going to be limits to how far you want to go, because the moon is in Taurus. Taurus is a sign which, from an Aquarian perspective, it's somewhat low profile. I think that your interests are what matters, and I'm not convinced that you're going to be really in the mood for compromise. You're going to want to do things your way. Now, if other people want to do things your way, that's fine. But you're not going to make any moves. You're not going to fit in with anyone else's perception of the world. And I suppose that is completely in keeping with Aquarius's famous desire to be independent. And that's certainly something you really can do. And this weekend, there is a serious side to you, because the moon is making a trine relationship to the sun in serious signs, at least serious for an Aquarius, in moon in Taurus, sun in Virgo. And it may feel, Aquarius, that there are some serious things that you need to discuss, think about. Serious things you need to think about and work on. And quite possibly you may be of the opinion that other people just won't really understand it, and that it's something that only you can do. And that might be true, but I do think that there may be one person out there who does share your seriousness, who understands some of your concerns, and perhaps you can work with this person to untangle perhaps a situation that you regard as being quite complicated. But if there is no other person around, then I think this weekend you'll be very good at untangling knots. That if there is a knotty situation that perhaps has been building up over the last few weeks, then this weekend you can look at it and be 100% focused on it, and you can really start to shed some light on it, and that I think could actually be quite a big relief. Pisces, you feel in, I think, quite a comfortable mood. I don't think Pisces, that it's going to necessarily be an exciting weekend. I don't think that you actually want too much excitement, but at the same time, I think in most cases you are going to be comfortable. You're going to be comfortable, particularly if you stick to fairly familiar ground. You know what makes you feel comfortable, and if you stay with what makes you feel comfortable, then I think that you're going to be fine, and your ability to express your needs is going to be very good. I think people will be very clear about how you want things, and there's unlikely to be many shocks, I think. Any shocks at all. Okay, it's true that the moon is conjunct Uranus, and so you could associate moon conjunct Uranus with shocks. And I suppose if there are any shocks and surprises, it just might have something to do with something you say, especially on Sunday. Just something you say might possibly be inappropriate. And I was saying the same thing to Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is, of course, is a sign that's ruled by Jupiter. Like you said, Jupiter and Sagittarius both ruled by Jupiter. And looking at Jupiter, and Jupiter is still quite close. It's quite close to Mars. I mean, it's I know it's quite a long way from Mars in one sense. It's 5 degrees, over 5 degrees from the conjunction between Jupiter and Mars, but it's still kind of there, that Jupiter-Mars, and it could just stir things up when you least expect it, and it may just be about something you say, and your choice of words at times may be unwise. You use a word that you think the word is fine, but you use the word, and the word may have connotations that are not fine at all, and it might just actually be quite crude. It might be I know it could be a swear word. It may be, or maybe you're talking about something which you're talking about a subject that people don't want to talk about, and you find yourself talking about it, and then you realize you've made a mistake. So do choose your words very carefully over the weekend. And I understand you actually have quite a lot to say, but you have to kind of filter what you say, and think about what words actually mean. If you're going to use a word and you've got a chance, look it up. Maybe check the dictionary to make sure you've got the right word, or perhaps it's got a meaning you hadn't appreciated. That's always possible. But this shouldn't diminish the weekend at all. I think that it's going to be a comfortable weekend, as I said right at the beginning, when things should move, and at the same time there will be a certain sense of structure. And structure, I think, at the moment, Pisces, is important. You don't want surprises. And in a way, if there are shocks and surprises this weekend, I think they will come from you and your own behavior and your own words and actions. Just doing something by mistake and saying something by mistake which disrupts the whole structure that you are actually trying to create. So in that sense, Pisces, it might be best if you take a very disciplined and cautious approach, and at the same time you might want to be careful who you are talking to, communicating with people. You don't actually this weekend want to be with people who have thin skins, who are overly sensitive, who have a past reputation for being quickly upset. So if you feel that someone is fragile, and in the past they've got annoyed about nothing, then maybe that's the kind of person you don't want to have around you this weekend. And I think that if you feel that way, then be open and honest about it. And so having control over the weekend is important, and that also links with self-control. But yeah, I'm not saying that it need be an exciting weekend. I don't think it will be an exciting weekend. I don't think you want it to be an exciting weekend, but I think it can just be comfortable. And I think that you will, in the end, reach a situation where you understand certain things which you perhaps hadn't understood before, and it will just be a natural understanding. The information will come your way, and hopefully by Sunday night you'll just feel a sense that you are centered and ready for the week ahead. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at the weekend from the perspective of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 57, the gentle. So this hexagram is about perhaps accepting that we aren't in full control, and there is a connection here between the gentle and whatever hierarchy we might be involved in, and perhaps we just have to accept our position in it, and maybe we're going to have to act under another person's authority. And there is a sense here with the gentle that we perhaps have to submit to something. And I know that doesn't sound good, submitting to something, but again, this is a Confucian oracle. Hierarchies have an important role to play in this oracle and in the Confucian way of looking at things. And with the gentle, we may be most effective when we are acting under someone else's command or someone else's supervision. Now, I don't know how appropriate that is for you. I suppose that could be in terms of the family, who's in control in the family, who's in control in the family in this weekend. If you have a job, then I suppose then that would be an employer, but I understand a lot of people don't work over the weekend, and it could be just an acceptance that there is an established way of doing things. It may not be that there's a real person out there telling us what to do. It may be that we're thinking about our internalization of authority figures, maybe our parents or someone else, how would you see it in terms of sort of Freudian perspective? Is that the superego? And so we do feel that we are acting under authority, and wherever that authority lies. And the I Ching doesn't seem to have a problem with that. It's saying that it is appropriate, and it seems that when we are acting under authority, whether that authority is some internalization of our parents or other authority figures, or whether it's real live authority figures like employers or anyone else, or I suppose it can happen in that social life. There are social hierarchies. We can do something really, really good. We can get hold of something. We can have some kind of victory. I mean, I think the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, I think talks about catching game. You know, I suppose if you're on a hunt, you're the person that sort of catches the game. Of course, I'm a vegetarian, so I'm not into that kind of thing, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. That's the way I am. But being successful, and as a result of being successful, being able to impress someone else, and we are likely to be most successful when we are under someone else's command. And I suppose that links 57, the gentle. It's not about trying to be super assertive, trying to act off our own bat. It's not about that. And so a certain amount of humility is required. Now, this hexagram does move, and it moves to hexagram 44, which is coming to meet. Now, the previous hexagram talked about the benefits of acting under authority. But coming to meet is suggesting there are absolute limits to that benefit. Coming to meet means that you're dealing with a powerful force who is trying to take control of you, is trying to tell you what to do. And it's a situation where you need to start thinking about your independence. So in a way, this weekend, you start the weekend being dependent and not being concerned about being dependent, doing what someone else says. That's okay. I mean, it depends who the person is, but by and large it's okay. But it can't go too far. There comes a point where you realize that you have to start being independent. And that's perhaps the key point about this weekend. Where is that change? Where you have to move from dependence to independence, and where you have to start protecting your independence and resisting pressures to get people to tell you what to do. So that's complicated. And so you have to realize where that moment is. And that is perhaps the key to making sense of a weekend, and perhaps to having a good weekend. Maybe it's Saturday, Sunday. Maybe Saturday is more about doing what other people say. But as you move from Saturday to Sunday, you've got to start thinking for yourself, and you've got to start perhaps put your foot down and say, well, enough is enough. You know, I understand perhaps there's a hierarchical relationship, but we don't want to push it too far. And you certainly don't want to be in a position where you are taken for granted. Okay, that was quite a short I Ching, I think. And now I want to look at Kamala Harris. And so Kamala Harris, she made her speech, she accepted a nomination, and I want to start by considering the chart for her accepting the nomination. And when I'm talking about Kamala Harris, you know, I know in the past I've tended to be quite negative about her, but I just want to try to be completely neutral about it. And you know, this election bothers me. It really does. You know, with the 2020 election, I was always 100% sure that Biden was going to win. Throughout, there was absolutely no doubt that Biden was going to win right through. You know, I remember on the evening of the election when people said that Trump was ahead, I was really shocked. I was thinking, no, this can't be right. You know, this is not right. This is not what my astrology tells me, because I was looking at a horary chart. I'm not showing a horary chart today, but the horary chart was a clean, obvious horary chart. Trump was going to lose. That was absolutely clear in 2020. 2012, it was absolutely obvious that Obama was going to win with astrology. Maybe it was obvious without astrology as well. 2016, I sat that out. I didn't really have any opinion. This election is really bothering me, and perhaps over the course of the rest of this video, perhaps you might see why it's bothering me. But I'm only looking at things from one or two views. But here is okay. Let's have a look at the chart for there's okay. The chart for her acceptance. So I was looking at her. I mean, I wasn't looking at it. I was listening to her speech, and I don't know. Obviously, there will be some kind of lag, and I was looking at the time as well. So as far as I can see, she accepted the nomination. She said the words, "I accept the nomination," at 9:44:30 p.m. I even managed to get the seconds in, but probably you can ignore the seconds. It doesn't really matter. And so this is a horoscope for that moment. Now, it's not the only horoscope to look for, and you certainly can't predict the result of an election on the basis of when she says "I accept." But it's a chart that one does need to look at, even if it doesn't mean anything in terms of predicting the election result. It's an important moment for her. So let's try to judge this chart and say, is this a good chart for accepting the nomination? So without comparing it to her chart, and I will compare it to her chart in a moment, but so the moon was in the 12th house. Now, you could say that's not great, the moon being in the 12th house. But that's using a Placidus house system. If you are using the whole sign house system, you would say that the moon is in the first house. The moon is above the horizon. And for a nighttime chart, it's good to have a moon above the horizon, that's for sure. And we have the moon is applying to a sextile of Jupiter. And it's actually a very close sextile to Jupiter. So the moon, when she said, "I accept the nomination," was at 17 degrees 6 Aries. And Jupiter was at 1754 Gemini. So having moon sextile Jupiter like that, that's good. It's what the moon is applying to in an electional chart. That is fortunate. What is the next aspect? Always, with a horary chart, with an electional chart, one of the most important things is to look at the moon's next aspect. And the moon makes a sextile to Jupiter, and then it makes a sextile to moon makes a sextile to Mercury. So that moon sextile Jupiter is good, but the moon is peregrine. It doesn't actually have any dignity in Aries. There's no dignity there. It's a peregrine planet. Jupiter likewise is a peregrine planet. It doesn't have any dignity where it is in Gemini. It's in its detriment in Gemini. So while the moon and Jupiter sextile is kind of fortunate, the moon and Jupiter by dignity perhaps are not great. And I suppose one should also look at the ascendant ruler and the fact you've got Chiron rising. Now, I don't know what Chiron rising means to you. You could say that might hint at a future disappointment, but it is Chiron. I wouldn't read too much into that. The moon does, of course, make the trine to Mercury. So when the moon makes a conjunction to Chiron, but it also makes that trine to Mercury. So I think that trine to Mercury, doesn't do us any harm here. It doesn't do Kamala any harm. Then you've got the ruler of the ascendant, and the ruler of the ascendant is, of course, Mars, and Mars is in Gemini, and Mars is exactly square Venus. So I kind of think that is interesting. We've got this exact Venus-Mars square. 1 minute arc, so 1 arc minute between the moon, Venus, Venus making that square to Mars, it's almost exact. Would I see that as being fortunate? The ruler of the ascendant square the ruler of the descendant? I think that could be a little bit of a problem. I don't think that's amazing. It does create tension. I suppose it might be telling us the obvious. Venus square Mars is the fact that I suppose it's about the forthcoming conflict between her and Donald, though I would take her as being Mars, I suppose, because it's ruler of the ascendant. And also, in terms of looking at how that chart relates to Kamala's chart, there are some really important link-ups which you've perhaps already noticed. So, turning to Kamala's chart, so that's her acceptance chart, and here is a chart there's Kamala's chart in the middle, and there is the acceptance chart on the outer wheel. So Kamala Harris, she has the moon at 2739 Aries and the sun at 2748 Libra. So she was born on a full moon, and I think that full moon, 27 Aries, opposition the sun at 27 Libra, is very much it's an incredibly important part of who she is. And at the time of her saying those words, that she accepts the nomination, I think I got that right, very accurately, the ascendant was at 26 degrees 38 Aries. So 26 degrees 38 Aries, it was exactly on her ascendant. So her full moon was completely emphasized by those words, that she accepts the nomination. And I think part of a problem with Kamala, I think, as a person, is this full moon. She is moon in Aries, and as a woman, Aries is what she should be. I mean, that's her way forward. The sun in Libra is sort of part of the past, and I kind of think that she has this issue that she doesn't know whether she is following or leading. And I think that may be part of a reason why she may be so difficult to work with, or so we're told. She's unclear, indecisive, but when she wants to be decisive, it's all done in a very exaggerated way. So the ascendant at 26 Aries is kind of focusing very much on her moon. This is kind of what she should be going and saying these words, that she accepts the nomination. You could say that is something very positive, that it's really indicating that it is the right path for her. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I just thought that was something very interesting, and an interesting connection there. Black Moon Lilith, when she accepted the nomination, true Black Moon Lilith was at 1514 Virgo. So it was exactly on her Pluto. So Pluto is a generational planet, and it's perhaps saying something about her generation, the people born in the mid-60s. So this person born in the mid-60s, Black Moon Lilith, is highlighting her generation. Now, I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, is a view that Black Moon Lilith is about female power from a positive perspective. So you could say that Black Moon Lilith on her Pluto is perhaps saying, oh, well, this is the time for a representative of that generation, a woman representative of that generation, to assert her power, and not just to accept the nomination, but to actually become president. So that is a way of looking at things in a positive way. So I'm not saying that her inauguration chart is a problem. I think that there are some good things about her inauguration chart. I think it's really interesting the way her inauguration chart links with her chart, and in particular the fact that the transiting ascendant was exactly on her full moon. And I also think that the Black Moon Lilith is certainly interesting, to say the least. Oh, and another aspect we see is this is an exact aspect. An exact aspect the moment she was saying this speech was she has her Venus at 1754 Virgo, and Jupiter was at 1754 Gemini. And as far as I understand, the speech went well, at least amongst her supporters. So Jupiter square her Venus. Normally you see Jupiter squares as being a bit unfortunate, but accepting the nomination I would have thought, be an important part of her life, a major event in her life, perhaps one of the most major events in her life. And yeah, Jupiter was square her Venus, exactly square her Venus. And you could say, certainly from a whole sign perspective, that Jupiter is in her first house. I know it's in the 12th house. Transiting Jupiter is in her 12th house from a Placidus perspective, but from a whole sign perspective, Jupiter is in the first. It's squaring her Venus, and that is perhaps Venus is the woman, perhaps the successful woman. Jupiter, and so Jupiter in this case may be something quite fortunate. Although I suppose we shouldn't forget that Saturn is also opposition her Venus. So her Venus is completely picking up the Jupiter-Saturn square. And the Jupiter-Saturn square is a very sort of collective energy. And maybe this suggests that she is in accord with the times in which we are living. Now, there's another thing about this convention, is that when it was formally adjourned, so someone said at the end, just after she'd finished speaking, that the convention is adjourned. I don't know how much weight there is on that, but here is the chart for when it was announced. Someone announced that that it was adjourned. So this would be the formal, perhaps, ending of the convention. Now, I looked at that chart and I thought, well, hold on, there's something interesting here, because we've got 1413 Taurus rising. And I think that rings a bell. 14 Taurus rising. Well, something always happens around when 14 Taurus rising is a very important degree, and in terms of US politics, because the president always gets inaugurated, unless it's a weekend or unless it's a Sunday, on the 20th of January of a year. So here's a chart for the inauguration of the president. So the inauguration of the president happens at midday, Washington, D.C., inauguration 2025, when you've got 1413 Taurus rising. So going back, that's 1413 Taurus rising. You always have Pluto at one degree Aquarius. Sorry, not Pluto. Always the Sun is going to be at 0 degrees Aquarius. But 1413 Taurus rising at the time of the inauguration, and indeed 1413 degrees rising at the time it was adjourned. So an exact lineup. Was that fixed? Did someone into astrology say, had someone noticed this? Did someone tell someone to say this is adjourned at that particular time? I'm sure the answer is no, but that is certainly an interesting coincidence. And I suppose, all things being equal, that coincidence would support a view that Kamala might win in January, in November. And so I think overall, I do like that moon sextile Jupiter at the time when she actually accepted the nomination, even though there was Venus square Mars, even though Moon and Jupiter were both devoid of dignity. But it might just have been about her. It might just have been about the event. It may say nothing about whether or not she's going to win the election. Now, as far as her prospects of winning the election are concerned, there is, I'm recording this on Friday morning, and it has been said that Robert Kennedy is going to announce that he's withdrawing from the election, and that he might endorse Trump. So I was thinking, what kind of impact does Robert Kennedy have on Kamala Harris? So here is RFK's chart, and don't have a time of birth for RFK. And if he were to withdraw from the election, and if he were to endorse Trump, I suspect that could be catastrophic, actually. Some people are underestimating, I don't know about underestimating people. Some people are downplaying it. But given this election is likely to be close and third-party candidates can make a big difference, RFK endorsing Trump and, of course, withdrawing could be significant, could have a significant impact on Kamala Harris. So what's the link up between RFK and Kamala Harris? So if we put Kamala Harris in the middle and RFK on the outer wheel, here's Kamala Harris's full moon. Moon at 27:39 Aries, Sun at 27:48 Libra. RFK's Neptune is at 26 degrees 2 Libra. And so RFK's Neptune is right on her Sun. So there is a certain sort of nebulousness creeping in here with RFK, that he's able to perhaps in some way to undermine her campaign by pulling out. And that may be how Neptune is actually working. And look at RFK's Mars. His Mars is exactly conjunct Kamala's Neptune. And so there's Kamala, the glamour, everything's looking fine, everything's great. She's just accepted a nomination. She's part of the Democrat collective. I was reading this. I was listening to someone on YouTube saying a difference between Democrats and Republicans is that the Democrats like to follow orders. They like to be part of something larger than themselves, and they kind of do what they're told. And whereas Republicans like to be different, they don't like to be told do what they're told. And so I suppose you think about that Neptune just being, everyone doing what they're told, the collective, the Democrat convention, and then his Mars right on her Neptune, spoiling it perhaps. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I think that this sort of Neptune interplay between Kamala Harris and RFK is potentially quite interesting. I probably need to look at this chart in a little more detail, but I do think that it is significant, him pulling out. Or we don't know whether he's pulled out. I mean, maybe by the time you watch this video, we will know whether he's pulled out. Maybe he'll delay it until next week. But this kind of could spoil things. Now, this brings me on to my final topic, is I want to look at Kamala and the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. I've looked at Kamala and a Jupiter-Saturn cycle before, and I am of the opinion that the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is absolutely critical to understanding this election. And I said in a relatively recent video that when you have elections which end in zero, like 1960, 1980, 2000, 2020, that when you have elections in zero, the incumbent tends to win. People talk about the incumbency effect, that if you're an incumbent in the American elections, you're likely to win. Yeah, but that is because the incumbents do so well when they're elected in 0 years. And so the 0 years are very often at the beginning of a new Jupiter-Saturn cycle. So let me kind of show you what I mean by this. So let's take the 1840 presidential election. In fact, can we go further to the 18... No, I think... okay, let's go to the 1840 presidential election. Long time ago. It actually took place, didn't happen on a single day, it actually took place up from October through to December. But this is when voting started in 1840. And so what's been happening since 1840, indeed since the Declaration of Independence, has been at the time of elections, Jupiter and Saturn have been getting closer and closer together. So at the 1840 presidential election, Jupiter and Saturn were... well, they were over nearly a sign apart. So there was a kind of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but it wasn't really quite there. You can't really say that that is the beginning of a new cycle. Not really. But when you move to the, say, the 1860 general election, this was the election in which Abraham Lincoln was elected, you can see it's getting closer. They're still in different signs, but Jupiter and Saturn are now only 12 degrees apart, even though they are in different signs. You move to the 1880 general election. Again, Jupiter and Saturn are about, now they're in the same sign. So it's a very Jupiter-Saturn conjunction kind of election, and getting closer and closer. Then you move to the 1900 general election. Jupiter and Saturn, okay, they are in different signs. They're now about half a sign, just over half a sign apart. And after that, in the elections following that, Jupiter and Saturn get closer and closer together. And so if we look at the 1920 general election, when Warren Harding got elected, Jupiter and Saturn, now there is a conjunction at the time of the election, 8 degrees apart. Then you jump 40 years to when say Kennedy got elected, and again Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, 12 degrees apart. Then finally you move all the way through to the 2020 general election, when Biden got elected, and there's Jupiter and Saturn only 5 degrees apart. So through the 19th century, Jupiter and Saturn have been getting closer and closer together at the time of the election. And so at the time of an election ending in 0, and the last election was 2020, and the idea is that if you are elected in an election ending in 0, your party is going to win the next election. And of course, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it represents the beginning of a new cycle. And it's the beginning of a new cycle. So Biden got elected in 2020. You'd expect him or Kamala to get elected also in 2024, this year. Now let me put this in sort of Excel perspective. So let me show you. I hope you can see this. Let me just. So if you look at this Excel sheet, these are all the elections that have... I haven't included the elections involving George Washington because he was kind of standing as an independent. Let me get this right. Hope you can see that. So these are all the elections where the incumbent won the next election. So, for example, in 2008, Barack Obama... I put that as a yes because Barack Obama was elected in 2008, and his party also won in 2012. I include 2000 because Bush was elected in 2000 and he was re-elected in 2000 and 2004. Or there's Kennedy. Kennedy was elected in 1960. He was shot. His vice president became elected. Lyndon B. Johnson became president, and he was re-elected in 1964. So this is the yes column, and these are the no columns. And so you can see in bold are the zero years, and you can see that in zero, the incumbent effect for these 0 years is absolutely massive. And so it goes right through to 1800. The incumbent elected in a year ending in 0 always wins, with 2 exceptions. So these are the 2 exceptions in 1840 and 1880. And in fact, we can say that the incumbent in years ending in 0, if you look at American history after George Washington, the president gets elected, the party gets re-elected 82% of the time. In years not ending in 0, it's only in 51% of the time. Now that difference is certainly interesting. It's not statistically significant. If you're interested, the p-value was only 0.065. I did a 2-sample prop test if you're interested, but it wasn't significant. But it was very close to being significant, and it was a small sample. So you could say, on the basis of this, that Kamala is surefire, she's going to win. You could say that. But we do have to look at the exceptions. Now, these exceptions were in 1840 and in 1880. Now, is it to do with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction? Now, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 1840 and 1880 wasn't exact. Far from it. So maybe that's why 1840 and 1880 didn't work. But there is another reason why 1840 and 1880 didn't work. And the thing is that the difference in 1840 and 1880 is that in both cases, the president at the end of the term did not re-stand. And so in both cases, 1840 and 1880, the president at the end of the first term, the 0 term, didn't re-stand 4 years later. And in both those cases, the president lost. And so you could say that in Kamala's case, she fits into the pattern of 1840 and 1880. If Biden had have stood, and there is a view that it was completely unnecessary for Biden to give way to Kamala. And I think it's actually quite possible that if you take this cycle, that the Democrats made a fatal mistake getting rid of Biden. Because if they'd kept Biden, the pattern would have completely stayed in place. But by getting rid of Biden, they're moving to the 1840-1880 model. And so that might indicate that Kamala could lose. But 1840 and 1880 were years when the Jupiter-Saturn cycle hadn't fully established itself at the time of the zeros. So you could then say, well, now as you move through the 20th century from 1920 and beyond, you have a situation where you've got a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the time of the election. That's a new beginning, new cycle, year ending in 0. And this cycle will continue until the opposition. That's not what the cycle will not go into crisis until the opposition. So the cycle beginning in 2020 with the Jupiter-Saturn's conjunction, by 2024 the cycle is just beginning. So it's more of the same, more Democrats, more Biden, Kamala. So we're in the sort of the the Democrat part of the cycle and of the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, and we're not going to get any sense of crisis until the 2028 election. But maybe the cycle relates to an individual. It was allowing an individual to keep going, not about a party. In that case, maybe it was dangerous for the Democrats to get rid of Biden, because actually it hasn't made that much difference to the polling. Not really, if you go back sort of a few months. But overall, astrologically, what I'm trying to sort of demonstrate in this video. I didn't really want to look at Trump's chart or the I didn't really want to look at the Republicans in this. That there are powerful arguments in favour of Kamala winning in November, and I do think that the Jupiter-Saturn cycle really does help her. But I'm just concerned. This whole thing just doesn't feel right, and I'm just wondering if one's kind of been sort of fooled by the astrology. And how do I articulate this? It's not just about astrology. It's about people's behavior. And can you judge an event? If you're trying to forecast an event, you also should consider, sort of hubris and nemesis, which sort of goes beyond astrology. I was just talking about the victory trip of Mike Lynch. When Mike Lynch, this British entrepreneur, he decided to have a victory trip after his success in the US courts. So he has a victory trip, and this continues even after his business, his co-defendant was killed in a car accident. And that was kind of exciting, sort of hubris and nemesis. And perhaps if you're trying to understand what's going on in the world, it's not just about the astrology, it's about people's behavior. And the thing is, the Democrats are behaving as if they're going to lose. And I know I shouldn't be talking about this, and I'm completely rambling. What do I mean by that? And this is perhaps a bit sort of controversial here, but I think that, for example, their obsession with dragging Trump through the courts indicates that at an unconscious level, they knew they were going to lose. If they'd been more relaxed about Trump fading into oblivion, they would have just left him alone. Biden would have given Trump the final insult by pardoning him. It would have been such an insult for Trump if Biden had pardoned him. But no, Biden didn't do that. So the Democrats are behaving like losers. You may not see that, but it seems to me that they are behaving like losers. And also the way we're attacking John F. Kennedy. Sorry, RFK. RFK, this complete defensiveness that the Democrats are showing by not allowing him to be on the ticket, even though in many states, really dragging it through the courts. Again, I suppose that's more lawfare, as they say. Then I think that that's antagonized RFK. He pulls out, and him being on the ballot is going to actually help Trump, rather than him pulling out is going to help Trump and not Biden. If he'd kept him on the ballot, that would have helped. That would have kind of not guaranteed, but it would certainly help them win. But the Democrats are kind of doing stuff in a hubristic way. And when you see hubris, and it's just not about the astrology, when you see the Democrats behaving in a hubristic way, and it's not about their policies, they're just behaving like losers. And that makes me worry about just looking at the astrology, particularly as I've not had a clear-cut chart. If I was just to focus on the astrology and trying to weigh it all up, I don't know. There's a lot to be said for the saying that the Democrats are going to win, but this whole thing is confusing me, and I know I'm sounding confusing, but I'm sort of demonstrating the confusion I feel that the Democrats, yes, I do think they seem to know at an unconscious level they're going to lose. I don't know whether you agree with me on that, but it's just their behavior. And I think that at a collective level, people can feel things. And I think they feel that Trump is going to win. And sometimes the crowd make very good predictions. They're a very, very good way of forecasting an event. And so if you want to use crowd behavior and group behavior as a way of predicting a result, maybe you don't need to use astrology, because the behavior of Democrats, to me, is just predicting a Trump victory. Even if the astrology is somewhat ambiguous. I am completely rambling, and I've certainly said enough. I'm kind of hoping you haven't got as far as into this video as to have heard what I've just said, because I feel this is completely irrelevant, but maybe I should just be sticking to the astrology. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you happen to like this video and you're not subscribed, I'd be really happy if you were to subscribe. If you are subscribed and you like the video, yeah, I'd be really, really happy if you were to press the like button. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.